So we're committed in 2030 to do 100% under 3.5 tonne and 50% of the over 3.5 tonne. I feel pretty confident with it, to be honest with you. It's only 2024. I feel fine with it. We're trialling a lot of things. So I just wanted to come today, even though our fleet's not big in Wales. I live in Cardiff, so it was on my doorstep. And it's just nice to talk to other people in the sector and just see what they're doing. I often go to things and I just fed into utilities companies, so it's quite nice to see more fleet managers from different backgrounds.
My role at the moment, I'm currently doing, I manages all the driver training and all the driver compliance. I mainly deal with heavy goods vehicles and heavy goods drivers. I got a bit of experience in waste management as well. And basically, we're in the middle of a fleet review where we're looking at decarbonisation and moving to electric vehicles. And I'm down here to steal any ideas you've got, really. Yeah. To be honest with you, we are moving on our light vehicles. Not as quick as we'd like, but we are moving on our light vehicles. Got a few questions around the heavy vehicles. I don't know how we're going to move with that, especially with the waste strategy at the moment, where recycling targets as well. So we're going to probably have to increase our heavies probably by 50%, which is going to be a huge cost of the authority in a difficult time. So down here really to listen to what ideas you've got, steal them and take them away.
Combined fleet, we have roughly around 1,500 vehicles, 1,200 on the police side, 300 on the council side. Tale of two stories. I met Neil through one of our decarbonisation projects, which actually got Bridgend Council off the floor in terms of electric vehicles. We don't have a lot of electric vehicles. We're probably running roughly around 2% of the fleet combined, which doesn't sound a lot in the grand scheme of things. Bridgend Council, we are running up of around 18 to 20 vehicles on electric. Like you say, Neil started that journey for us, which was really interesting. We understood what that actually means. I suppose the white elephant in the room for me is the police side of things, because I look around this table and my priority is to supply vehicles. If you make a 999 call, that we respond to it respectfully. The architecture within vehicles doesn't support rapid charging unless you pay a premium price on vehicles. Unless you go for a Hyundai or a Kia or the Genesis platform that are within constraints of public money, then you are looking at a 400 volt architecture, which however much voltage you want to put into it in terms of megawatts, the car will only take what the car decides it wants to take.
My main client and my main hat that I'm wearing today is an organisation called Zemo Partnership. Been around for about 20 years. It used to be the Low Carbon Vehicle Partnership, so if you haven't heard of Zemo, you may have heard of Low CVP. For Zemo, and the reason I'm here today is we are involved in a fairly major project with the Welsh Government, looking at commercial vehicle decarbonisation, policy, strategy, roadmaps, and that's kind of filling up quite a lot of my time between now and towards the end of the year, looking at Welsh commercial vehicle fleet, what sorts of vehicles, what sort of ages of vehicles, where are they, what sorts of mileages are they doing, and how do we decarbonise that fleet, looking out to 2050 to get to net zero by that date.
Run a fleet about 140 vehicles, 3.5 and under, and about 40 HGVs. Currently, about 20% of the 3.5 tonne is electric and about 10% of the HGV. I remember back in 2020 when I was appointed to this role, like every other fleet operator, trying demos on Nissan ZNV200 and Renault Kangoos, charge them through the window in offices. That's the only thing we could have. Since then, we accelerated the decarbonisation. We got about 80 chargers for our fleet, thanks to Cardiff Capital Region. They financed the first project, and then Welsh Government Energy Service to another 2 sites. So now we can declare procurement electric only from next year for anything less than 7.5 tonne. We have our first 2 12.5 tonne HGVs, Electra. For a month now, they got some issues, but like everything else, you know, electric vehicles, they won't be the same as diesel. It took a while to get the drivers used to the vans. now the next challenge, HGVs, and we'll see how the journey ends.
We're an intelligent EV charging solution specialist. Essentially, we tend to operate in a business-to-business environment, so we provide commercial critical fleet support. And what I mean by that is customers of ours like National Grid and the like, where they are charging their vehicles on their substations. We provide the charging solutions for those. Charging has developed in the 12 years that I've been involved with it, from posts on the side of streets at 7 kilowatts to systems that we're now installing that have battery storage to smooth out the peak loads. We're looking at solar battery, like what I call the Holy Grail, renewable systems. We've got the ability now to provide new DNO connections, but new DNO connections on the basis of an asset valuation, which means that the end user doesn't pay for it. We're trying to find different ways of supporting businesses at different levels to provide charging solutions across the board. But essentially in my role, I, as I say, started working EV charging 12 years ago, as I was qualifying as an electrician, when we kind of dipped our toes into it. I'm now the operations director, so essentially I look after everything that we install and everything we support thereafter. So it's up to me if it works, essentially. So yeah, that's enough about me. But yeah, I'm looking forward to the event.
Great, thank you, Alan, and again, thank you to Electrosure for sponsoring.
For the last 7 years, the Cardiff Capital Region was a £1.2 billion city deal, which its aims were to provide 25,000 jobs, to attract £4 billion of private sector leverage, and to increase GVA. Since April, we have now transitioned into a corporate joint committee. New legislation means that we're now responsible for regional transport planning, strategic development plans, and economic well-being. So for our region, that means that our transport plan is not a traditional transport for transport's sake. It's all about growing the economy, making things more equal. We're all about being competitive, connected and resilient. So to enable us to do that, we've got an energy strategy. We're in the process of preparing our regional transport plan, and down the line then we will align that with a future strategic development plan. But it's all about doing the right stuff and not the easy stuff.
Opportunities and projects to produce our own energy, solar or wind farms nearby Merthyr, using national grid or private cables, like you were saying, to transfer the energy back to our vehicles directly, and we future-proof that. Most of our electric vehicle chargers, they're connected separate from the buildings, so we can put batteries in place connected to different connections.
A number of public places, parks, Cwmdaren and Rysgyd, that has a small number of charge points. I should say as well that my particular remit is looking at our fleet. So we have separate people that are looking at community charging, that comes from our network infrastructure people. I'm looking specifically at fleet. So at these parks we do have infrastructure that is available for the public, but also available for fleet. But we also have two main depots. We've got over 50 charge points now installed, 7 kilowatts at our depots, spread to all the sites. Most of that is in 2 sites, which are our main depots, and they're suitable for smaller vehicles. And now we've got the infrastructure in, we are working on rolling out electric vehicles.
We're a small Bridgend-based company with, I suppose you could say, big ambitions to enable. We're enablers. So we've got a number of large sort of multi-megawatt renewable generation sites. We've got some in Ebervale, we're down as far as Swansea, Bridgend. Yeah, so we recognise that there is a need for renewable energy to reduce the cost for mainly sort of the EV fleets. So I'm here today to try and find out what the requirement is for mainly sort of higher megawatt chargers, 500 kilowatt for the bigger fleets, really, for the bigger trucks and things. You know, there's very little capacity, sort of 500 kilowatt wise on the network at the moment with National Grid. So we've got a number of, as I said, multi-megawatt, 30, 40 megawatt sites in the planning process that we could use sort of private wires down to different areas and help these guys transition towards EV at hopefully cost effectively.
As a community car charging infrastructure, we've evolved from the community renewable energy sector, so we've all piled some money in. We've now evolved to be a car club company, as it were. So we're setting up community car clubs with a couple of EVs in various locations when there's an interest. And we've got an app from the European renewable energy sector called the Mobility Factory. So you don't need a key for the car, you fit the hardware in, and then it's all done by app. You book the car, you know, and it charges you accordingly for the amount of time you've taken it out, and we put charge points in for that. So we've got about 8 locations. We've had £500,000 in funding from Big Lottery, and we've recently had £1 million funding from Welsh Government as well. So they're on board, and it's all about reducing the number of cars on the road, not just changing all the internal combustion engines to electric vehicles.
We're a vehicle tracking provider based up in Newtown in Powys. Been in the industry now for since 2001 when the business was founded. I joined the company 16 and a half years ago, and my job really is to ensure that we're out introducing our product to customers to help them. Typically, we want to help them utilise their fleets better, we want them to be compliant, we want them to be safe. But the conversations have shifted quite heavily over the last 3 or 4 years. We often sit in a room with people who say, we've got to move to EV, we don't really know how to do it, we're not really sure what to do. Well, the key point is we have all of the data. We know where your vehicles are going, we know how they're driving, we know the areas that they operate in. So we're able to help you, whether you want to pull that data out of our system through APIs into other systems, but typically we're able to give you an overview of what your vehicles are doing, where they're doing it, how they're doing it, and in essence gives you the ability to make a decision as to whether or not the vehicles can be swapped across to EV, which Denzel, I think you alluded to that you've done with us. You know, the key area here is that you're dealing in fact. We know the information that we're giving you around the mileages, around the areas, around the infrastructure that exists in those areas. You can rely upon it because it's real, genuine data. And to give you an idea, we currently have in the UK around 275,000 vehicles tracked across our network. As a business, we operate across Europe and also the US, but we are finding that the EV question is asked far more in the UK than anywhere else. So yeah, we bring to the table the ability to know that your vehicles are out there, they're being utilised, they're being compliant, and they're being safe. But we can give you that next level as well to help you make decisions as to whether or not a transition from an ICE to an EV vehicle is doable and feasible. And we've been doing a lot of that over the last couple of years.
So for us, it's not about what we have, it's about what you all have to offer that we could possibly embrace and support that. To be fair, Sean has done a lot of work within Bridgend Council in terms of the Evolve platform, which has allowed us to put a path into our own journeys and what that actually looks like. And we are currently running some council vehicles outside of their scope to do witness statements and so forth else. And day on day, we're able to see where those vehicles are, and we can direct police officers to go and sweat that asset.
Going back to obviously to Liam's point, yeah, you know, your guys are typically taking their vans home, and you know, with the best will in the world, not everybody's going to have a nice driveway they can go and park a car on and then be able to plug it in.
Do you know, sorry Liam, do you know how many of your employees have off-road parking and would be prepared?
So yeah, we done like a bit of a survey a couple of years ago really. I think only about 10%, something like that.
Yeah.
Only 10% have got off-road parking?
Yeah,
Wow.
I'd say the majority of the drivers are like trade operatives.
Yeah.
So you know, they live in terrace houses and things like that really. So
On that one as well, we did a survey with our vehicles that are taken home, and only 40%, 35 to 40% had off-road parking, so 60% did not.
Yeah, I think that's very similar with RCT. We did some work with RCT a year or so ago when they again were looking at the transitional point, and we worked out that a lot of the vehicles that were going home were actually parked on roads. I mean, the key point here is we're able to map and show where any vehicle is parked overnight, and in essence, one could argue you could bring in KML mapping and actually overlay the KML mapping to see exactly where the charge points are. And what we've been able to do is also identify where you've got public charging and what public charging is in that particular area. But again, the problem is if you're operating in a relatively small geographical zone, which in fairness you guys are, you tend to find then that you can, in theory, send everybody to the public charging network, and now the public charging network is overrun. And then you're kind of then causing a problem that you've got what's deemed to be council/public sector vehicles using public charging.
Exactly.
So the other, just that might be helpful. The other thing that we've done is we've looked at grouping. So if we have a number of people in an area that all group together, so we could put. Doesn't work very well for us at all. They are very scattered throughout, so you can't even say, okay, there's 10 houses there, they're taking vehicles home, they're parking them on the road, just up the road there's a bit of spare land, we put 10 charges up there and they can all charge.
They also don't necessarily have to live in your borough, do they? Because you're not just employing people who work in the, you're not employing people who live in the Caerphilly area. You know that, you're kind of not in that situation. So you can have people who are obviously working in Caerphilly could be living in Cardiff. Yeah. So again, you've got that same issue. But I guess the key point of pulling in the tracking data is that we're able to show you where all your vehicles are at night and how long they're there for. So we can almost show you your duty cycle the opposite way around, the duty cycle of when you're operational, and then the duty the unduty cycle, as it were, that says, well, this is obviously where how long my vehicles are parked where they've got no movement. Key point from the tracking provider, we'd know what vehicle type it was. We'd know whether it was currently an ICE vehicle or whether it was currently an EV as well. So we'd be able to say this is the potential based on what the ICE vehicles are in that particular area now, and this is currently what has transitioned to EV. And if you made the assumption that X amount percentage was going to transition over each year, you'd be potentially be able to see how that's going to kind of start to grow exponentially as the time goes on.
So is there any issues in regard to data sharing in that respect?
Well, that's where you'd have to anonymise it, because as I say, that's how our safe speed data works. In the fact that we know every single speed a vehicle does, but we don't name the vehicle. All we can say is that road out there, the mean average speed on it is 15 miles an hour. You've gone at it at X, and you just do you could potentially do a similar thing.
So Sean, how many organisations like yours are there doing it? So if you were to aggregate that data, what
tracking companies? Wow. I'd like to say it's just us, but sadly we haven't got world domination yet. I mean, in the UK, I would suggest mainstream. I would suggest there's probably 15 mainstream tracking companies with similar customer bases to us, I would suggest. And obviously, again, there'd have to be some form of collaboration around that. But I mean, we have especially a lot of councils ask us where vehicles are kept overnight. I think that's, and excuse my ignorance here, but I think that has something to do with when you have an O licence, you've got to be able to confirm where vehicles are. Because I know we do some stuff for Cardiff where we have to prove that their refuge vehicles are kept at. I'm trying to think of the name. For you, Tirabith, and then the Cardiff, it's the site down at
Lambie Way.
Yeah, Lambie Way. And again, we have to produce that data, which they have to provide. So there's no reason why it couldn't be done. I guess we just have to understand, how we would make that appear.
Because the utility industry, I mean, we're talking about local authorities because there's so many around the table. But when I work for a construction consultancy, I used to do audits for South West Water and work with one of their T2 suppliers. They've all got tracking. Tracking stuff as well, so it's not just local authorities. Very quickly, if you look at utilities and add those on other public sector bodies, natural resources, wells and stuff.
That's it, absolutely, and that's one of our customers. And again, we do stuff for them. I mean, statistically, if you look at the UK market, the UK market for vehicle tracking is the most saturated market in the world. Ironically, you'd think it wouldn't. You'd think it'd be America or somewhere like that, but it's not. The biggest saturated market for vehicle telematics is the UK, typically because we're a small island and it's been operating for 20 odd years. You know, when I joined vehicle tracking 25 years ago, it was kind of this wonderful, magic, scary
Is there a
thing.
trade association that all these tracking companies belong to?
No.
I've been down this route.
We're completely unregulated.
How do we get these people?
It's terrible. I mean, I'm going off at a tangent, but but absolutely. I mean,
all of you
correct.
provide this data. So
Yep.
it's all anonymised. We can use it for the whole benefit of everybody. There isn't a trade association to do that.
Association of Food Professionals.
I was about to say they're doing some work on it, aren't they?
They've been doing this for a couple of years. They're
Yeah.
working with three.
Yeah, Lorna is aware of
They're
it.
working with 3 telematics providers, and they will have some data on the authorities, and it's specifically for local authorities.
Yeah.
Now,
We've been
they-
approached by them recently, to be fair.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and they, I don't know what data they've got for Wales, but it's definitely worth asking. And if they haven't been focusing on Wales, there's no reason why they couldn't.
No, there are public maps. I'm working with these maps that are published from Europe, coming to UK for all commercial vehicles, and they have hotspots where there are to install charging points, where to install megawatt charging. This is the data that I use for the project for National Grid. So from somewhere they have this telematic data for all commercial vehicles.
This is specifically for vehicles that are parked on the street overnight to understand where the
this is a
on the
different
street charging.
But if we're looking at combining information, which is a great idea, from my perspective, if I was going to allow that to happen, then we need to get that past our data security manager.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay?
Yeah.
Which means that each person would have to do that. Now, here's a role, surely, for Welsh Government to set up a framework. So rather than me having to write the DPIA, etc., etc.
Yeah, no, indeed.
That there's a centralised framework that we can say, yes, we can share this data. Here's the framework. It tells us what we can share, what we can't share, how it's going to be shared. So therefore, you give that to the data security manager, and you share the data.
I mean, the key point is, again, you know, from our perspective, off the top of my head, I think there are only six or seven Welsh councils we don't work with. And, you know, we're doing our best to try and get into all of them, as one would expect. But the point is, if we had collaboration now, whether that needs to be through Welsh Government or through each individual council, there's nothing stopping us saying, well, as a joint venture, we could merge all of that data together for all of the councils that we currently track to say, this is what your overnight information looks like. I mean, we could do it for you today now, and that's easy. But what you're trying to do is say, well, we're trying to say, well, if we've got people working for Cardiff Council, where are they living, and people and so on and so forth.
Transport electrifications and smart grids and all the interfaces that there are between these 2 important infrastructure systems that in the past these were not coupled together, they were so independent, but now they merge together, and it is like a new industry. At the end, there are so many other interfaces, so I'm working in a whole system approach. The value, as I said, of some other disciplines, and very important, the cybersecurity aspect, because comparing with a very traditional cars, when an electric vehicle is charged, there is an exchange of data. There are a lot of vulnerabilities in this exchange of data, but there are also vulnerabilities that are introduced to the power system. The power system was so well protected in the past by the SCADA system that it was at the transmission level. Now with all these entry points that there are in all places, and we don't know also who is responsible for cybersecurity and for the security of data, we are researching quite a lot this aspect as well. This is a collaboration with the School of Computer Science and Informatics. Also, I'm leading the transport energy infrastructure. This is in a global center for clean energy and equitable transportation solution. I have my notes because with this abbreviation it's quite difficult to remember. This is a very new center, global center. This is a 10 million center between UK and US. This was the first centers that were founded in this collaboration. 5 million is for UK. We are working with Birmingham University, and also in US we are working with the University of Illinois Chicago. In this center, I'm leading transport energy infrastructure. Again, this merge between transport and the power system. And in this center, we are planning 2 pilots. One pilot is in South Wales, and the other is in West Midlands. And also, we have a pilot in Chicago. This is a five years project. I'm working close with the National Grid.
We also have a role, we also like to bring partners together because we have networks from across sectors and across fields of interest. We currently convene a community of practice on behalf of the Welsh Government on the foundational economy. And so with transport being a foundational sector and also energy being a foundational sector, we are currently just really exploring with partners the role of community generated energy within EV charging. And there's other issues that sometimes might be sidelined or, you know, it's really difficult. The complexity you just talked about, the technicalities and logistics of EV charging, how are you also meant to think about, are there opportunities for community transport? Are we thinking about transport-led development? What does all this mean for transport inequality and life chances and things like that? It's too big for one person to think about. But by bringing lots of partners together, we can start to think about those things.
When we set up a car club, we needed, Tracy knows from our discussions with Welsh Government, we needed to be used at least 1/3 of the time to make it cost neutral. And even more than that, we're making money for reinvestment.
And likewise, one of the project that I'm trying to push out, even though it's South Wales Police led, I'm speaking to my counterparts in North Wales, Dyfed Powys and Gwent, so we can try and embrace it as a Welsh programme. It's nothing better just trying to get it out as a... We will pilot it, but then the vision is, and knowing that you deal with North Wales.
Well, I've had a couple of meetings with David Llewellyn as well, and Dyfed Powys, the police commissioner, and he's very keen on it. But if we've got customers who are going to use our cars, that strengthens our business case.
Just as an example, Kate, if this does launch in the way that we're hoping, or I'm hoping it will launch, based on the Vale figures and that of Cardiff City Council, that would increase our fleet by 40% available to go out and do victim statements.
There is a trick. We've got a 500 kilowatt wind turbine, community owned, and we sell directly to Welsh Water at 14 pence a unit. So you can, if you sub 5 megawatt, you can buy directly from the generator.
That makes sense, because I've done a calculation like our energy manager. He's trying his best to get the best deals, but looking at the standing charges and data collection software, and it works out about 36 pence per kilowatt. That's how much we pay for our own energy. Very close to 40 what you get charging Tesco. So it's ridiculous how expensive it is for business and local authorities to, just get the good deal on the energy.
And one of the things I was going to say about in terms of like the collaboration is having hybrid charging in terms of public-private. So it's private at times and public at others. So essentially for your vehicles, it's cost-free. It's not, you pay the energy costs. But outside of those hours or at specific times or for specific people with access to that site, you charge them a premium to use your charging infrastructure. A premium, you make money on it. Essentially, we balance out the cost model so that you made enough money to make money back essentially on it. The ability in our CPMS to send out text messages like please move, or
and
your account is run out, or whatever else. And
this is the really, I think this is the important stuff, isn't
but we
it?
so
the
upstairs
of it.
so upstairs is actually our landlord at our offices, and they said, oh yeah, crack on, like install EV chargers, it's fine. And now they've all got electric vehicles. All the directors are saying, can we borrow your chargers? No. Well, you can pay for it. But the critical part of it is making sure you have your terms like set out so that we have 9 electric vehicles, 6 chargers. We kind of rotate. That's fine. But what we wouldn't want to do is say, yeah, knock yourselves out, and then they've taken them all up when we come in. And so it's about having terms, agreements, making sure your contracts, I suppose, are in place to do that. But certainly, like if you're like we are on an industrial estate, and say 3 or 4 businesses decided to install EV chargers, and you decided as a group to go into partnership to utilise those for your vehicles, it's not outside of what I'm talking about with you guys in terms of like that partnership endeavour to provide a service you all need, but just in a manner that you all own and you all see kickback from as well.
So our strategy is first, we got the charging infrastructure, then we replace all the vehicles, and then we put the solar energy directly into vehicles. So hopefully by 2040, something like that, we could operate the fleet with no cost to energy.
And we realised that we realised that through a series of our customers. We through our work with National Grid, we've realised that some of their sites will have 60 amps total. They're small substations in Cornwall, for example. They have 60 amps total, but they need DC charging. It's the same as in Scotland. They're the last ones to do, because Lord knows how we're going to do it, because they're miles from anywhere. Well, like I ended up hiring an internal combustion engine car down there because I couldn't do all the running around I had to do in my electric car. So I understood the problem they had, the same up in Scotland. So what we're looking at is two separate things. The first is if there is power on site to trickle charge a battery storage system. What essentially you can do is you can power up the battery storage system to 200 kilowatts. That'll discharge. You essentially scope it so that it charges the amount of vehicles you believe you will have, worst case, plugged into your system. It can be as vast or as small as it needs to be, depending on DC or AC or otherwise. And that's one way of doing it. That's one way of utilising your existing power. But what I was talking to Denzel about was something we realised was a bit of a gap in the market, and something that we were really keen to investigate was essentially when you ask for a DNO upgrade, when you ask for an upgrade of power into a building, you're talking about well, best case you're talking about an upgrade of fuses. You may have the supply that's already there, it's already been over-engineered well above what you have, and essentially they replace your fuses and upgrade your connection. But what we've looked into is a program where we engage with the DNO for the new connection from the substation, from the network, but then we bring in an independent connection provider to install that substation. Well, that means that they take what's called the non-contestable work. I'm talking to you like you know
No,
exactly
I know.
what I'm talking about.
As he was talking, first thing I was going to say is, why don't you just upgrade the substation? But
Right. Yeah.
that's what I'm listening.
Exactly.
Like,
So you so you have what's called the non-contestable work, and that's basically the stuff that you can take to another provider. That's where we bring the ICP in. But the sort of cream on the cake for our customers has been we've now got a three-party partnership with an ICP and an IDNO. Now, an IDNO essentially will give you what's called an asset valuation. So in the event that you're looking at a substation on site, which, as I mentioned to you before, like a new smaller substation on site previously would have been financially unviable. You're talking huge figures. Essentially, that
wouldn't have belonged to you at the end.
No,
it would be your asset.
Exactly. Whereas in this case, the IDNO purchased that asset from you and then lease it back to you over a period of time, like some quote 99 years, some 10, 20, 30, whatever. But essentially what that means is that you don't pay for that asset up front. So essentially it's an OPEX rather than a CAPEX. As I mentioned earlier, the ability to bring in battery storage into that piece, and then the solar on top. And as I said before, that's then your holy grail. That's your, it's renewable, it's owned, it's yours. And it's as much as there is a cost to the charging and the solar and whatnot, but essentially in terms of saving on energy costs and the like is best case.
This is battery second life.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay?
Yeah.
So its first life is over, and rather than disposing of that battery, you're saying because you bought that asset outright, which
That's
is
correct.
a bit unusual, you would then keep the battery and connected. This is what connected energy are doing. So
Yeah. So you're
big-
right.
it's a big-
Yeah,
The
so
car,
they've-
the car would go to
But
scrap.
Denzel, what's interesting is your assumption that your vehicle is going to last longer than your battery.
Yeah, the car would go to scrap.
Which,
The battery's
which I'm
probably worth
afraid you may
anything.
have to put a new vehicle around the battery.
You're only putting a new battery in the old vehicle. Because the battery
Yeah, it's the other way
will last longer
around.
than the vehicle
Yeah.
does.
Twice as
Yeah,
long.
yeah.
But
And
when the vehicle gets to the end of its life, the battery still has value. That's the point. So using that battery in a second life application absolutely makes sense. It's an important factor that I don't think you mentioned it, when you say it depends on the location as well. I'm not sure if it's uniform across all the DNOs now, but it's certainly, I know some of them are doing it. This idea of your available capacity on a particular depot changing according to the time of day.
Yes.
So if you happen to be near a shopping centre or a
called
factory or something that's shut down overnight,
It's called the
their
timed
power becomes
connection.
available to do. Yes, so a timed connection. So you effectively do a deal like with the shared infrastructure. That says, well, yes, if I'm only going to plug my vehicles in between midnight and 6 a.m, then you can have this much power.
Or better than that, you can charge the battery overnight
after 6 a.m.
and then charge them in the day.
That factory needs it, or the shopping centre needs it, or whatever, and you can't have that much power.
No,
Yeah.
it's such
You don't necessarily have to put in a whole new substation.
such a simple
Power is available
simple
locally.
solution, and so easy to implement.
More recently, I have project funded by National Grid Electricity Transmission, more than 1.5 million. The most recent project is to look at the impact of megawatt charging of electric trucks on the grid. And also I finalized a project for the feasibility study of dynamic charging on the road and the design of substations in order to support such important at the end alternative for electric vehicle charging.
Big trucks and electric HGV megawatt charging. One of the other organisations I've been doing some work for and doing some work for currently is BSI, British Standards Institute, and I'm technical author for a draft code of practice on public charging infrastructure for electric HGVs. That is currently out for public consultation. So those of you that are in that space, are interested in that, what say charging site would need to look like, how it would need to work. If you're not familiar with that code of practice, the consultation period runs until next Friday, the 26th. The technical term is BSI Flex 2071. So if you Google BSI Flex 2071, hopefully you'll find that draft code of practice. As I say, you've still got time to feed in any comments.
A question as well off the back end of that. Thinking about some of the, looking at the age profile of people when we're getting older and older, and pacemakers being part of day-to-day activity, how does induction loop charging, which is what we're talking about, how does that affect somebody with a pacemaker if they were to be crossing that road and the detriment that it could have on their well-being? Well, they wouldn't have a well-being.
Yes, there is the protection associated with this element. There is this interference, electromagnetic interference, and it is also, for example, different case studies, what happens if you drop your keys and you are going. So there are different levels of protection and different case studies that are done for wireless charging.